The Velrath Dominion had conquered over 200 species across the galaxy. Their warships blocked out the stars wherever they went. Their armies crushed entire civilizations in weeks. No one had ever stopped them. No one had ever tried. Ambassador Xyreth stood on the balcony of the High Council chamber on Kethros 7. His pale blue skin reflected the light of the 3 moons above. Below him, the streets of the capital city were empty. The Mirathi people had fled to underground shelters. They knew what was coming. 3,000 Velrath warships surrounded their planet. The enemy fleet hung in orbit like a dark cloud of death. General Torvax had sent his message that morning. Surrender or be destroyed. There would be no mercy. There would be no negotiations. Xyreth had sent desperate pleas to every known species in the galaxy. He had begged the Korath Union for help. He had called upon the Sindari Republic. He had even reached out to the Oreth Collective. None of them responded. They were all afraid of the Velrath. They had all seen what happened to species that stood against the Dominion. The Mirathi were peaceful. They had never built warships. They had never trained soldiers. They believed in knowledge and art and the beauty of the universe. Now that universe was about to crush them into dust. Xyreth returned inside and sat at his communication console. He pressed his hands against his face and tried to think. There had to be someone. There had to be some species willing to help, but the silence from the other civilizations told him the truth. The Mirathi would die alone. Then his console lit up with an incoming signal. Xyreth sat up straight. The signal came from an unknown source at the far edge of the spiral arm, a region the galactic community called the Frontier, a place where a young species had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. The humans. Xyreth knew almost nothing about them. They had been part of the galactic community for less than 50 years. They kept to themselves. They had a small fleet. They had never fought in any major conflict. Most species considered them unimportant. The message appeared on his screen. It was simple and direct. We received your distress call. We are coming. Hold on. Xyreth stared at the words. He did not know whether to feel hope or pity. These humans had no idea what they were facing. The Velrath had destroyed fleets of thousands. What could a small species from the edge of the galaxy possibly do against such power? On the human homeworld called Earth, Captain Daniel Cole stood in the command center of Fleet Command. He was a tall man with short gray hair and calm brown eyes. He had served in the military for over 20 years. He had never backed down from a fight in his life. Admiral Laura Bennett sat across from him at the table. She was a woman of 60 years with silver hair and sharp green eyes. She had led the human fleet through 3 border conflicts. She knew the risks better than anyone. The Velrath have 3,000 ships, she said. We have 12 that can make the jump in time. This is suicide, Daniel. Dang. Daniel nodded slowly. I know the numbers, Admiral. But those people asked for help. No one else is answering. That. Because everyone else knows they cannot win. Maybe winning is not the point. Laura studied him for a long moment. She had known Daniel for 15 years. She had seen him lead men into impossible situations and bring them back alive. But this was different. This was not a border skirmish. This was war against the most powerful empire in the galaxy. If we send those ships, we might lose them all, she said. If we do not send them, we lose something worse, Daniel replied. We lose who we are. Laura closed her eyes. She thought about the reports she had read. The Velrath did not take prisoners. They did not show mercy. They burned worlds and enslaved populations. If humanity did nothing, the Mirathi would be erased from existence. She opened her eyes and looked at Daniel. Take your 12 ships. Do what you can. But bring as many of our people home as possible. Daniel stood and saluted. Yes, Admiral. Within 6 hours, the human fleet gathered at the edge of their solar system. 12 ships against 3,000. The crew members knew the odds. They had seen the intelligence reports. Many of them wrote messages to their families before the jump. Commander Kevin Price stood beside Daniel on the bridge of the starship Defiance. Kevin was younger, with dark hair and serious blue eyes. He was the best tactical officer in the fleet. "The crew is ready," Kevin said. "But I have to ask, do you really think we can make a difference out there?" Daniel looked at the stars through the viewport. Somewhere far away, a peaceful species was waiting to die. They had called out for help, and only humans had answered. "I do not know if we can win," Daniel said, "but I know we have to try. That is what makes us human." The fleet jumped. Across the galaxy, the other species watched through their long-range sensors. The Korath observed from their border stations. The Sindari monitored from their listening posts. The Arath tracked the human ships as they traveled through space towards certain death. None of them understood why the humans were doing this. The Marathi were not allies of Earth. They had never traded with humans. They had never even met a human in person. Yet these strange beings from the small blue planet were racing toward a battle they could not win. Ambassador Xyrith received word that the human fleet would arrive within 2 days. He shared the news with the Marathi Council. Some of them wept. Some of them prayed. Some of them simply sat in silence, trying to understand. "Why would they come?" one council member asked. "They do not know us. They owe us nothing." Xyrith shook his head. "I do not know. But they are coming, and we must prepare to receive them." In orbit above Kethros 7, General Torvax received reports about the approaching human fleet. He was a massive creature with thick gray scales and 4 powerful arms. He had led the Velroth military for over 30 years. He had never lost a battle. His officers laughed when they heard about the humans. 12 ships, a species barely out of their own solar system. It was not even worth preparing for. But Torvax did not laugh. He studied the reports carefully. He had learned long ago that the most dangerous enemies were often the ones you underestimated. "Let them come," he said quietly. "We will see what these humans are made of." The galaxy held its breath. The Marathi waited in their shelters. The humans flew toward war, and somewhere in the darkness between the stars, a battle was about to begin that would change everything. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kethros system. 12 ships hung in the darkness of space, their hulls gleaming under the distant starlight. Before them, blocking the path to the planet, waited 3,000 Velrath warships. Captain Daniel Cole stood on the bridge of the Defiance and looked at the enemy fleet on the main screen. The Velrath ships were massive. Each one was 3 times the size of the largest human vessel. Their weapons bristled from every surface. Their shields glowed with deadly energy. "All ships report ready," Commander Kevin Price said from his station. "Fighter squadrons are standing by." Daniel nodded slowly. He could feel the tension on the bridge. Every officer knew what they were looking at. Every crew member understood the odds. But no one asked to turn back. No one suggested retreat. A communication signal came through from the Velrath flagship. Daniel ordered it displayed on the main screen. General Torvax appeared before them. His gray scales caught the light of his command center. His forearms were crossed over his broad chest. His yellow eyes studied the human captain with cold interest. "I am General Torvax of the Velroth Dominion," he said. "You have entered a war zone. Your tiny fleet cannot hope to challenge us. Surrender now, and I will grant your crew a quick death. Resist, and you will suffer." Daniel stepped forward. His voice was calm and steady. "I am Captain Daniel Cole of the Earth Defense Fleet. We received a distress call from the Marathi people. We came to answer it." "Over one." Torvax tilted his massive head. "You came to die for strangers? Your species is even more foolish than I thought." "Maybe," Daniel said, "but we came to fight." He cut the communication. The bridge was silent for a moment. Then Kevin spoke. "Enemy fleet is moving to intercept. They are launching fighters." Daniel sat down in his command chair. "Launch our fighters. All ships. Move to attack formation. Let them see what humans can do." The Velrath fleet advanced like a wall of death. Their fighters poured out by the thousands. Their weapons charged with enough power to crack planets. They expected the humans to break and run. Every other species had done so when faced with such overwhelming force. The humans did not run. Lieutenant Amy Turner sat in the cockpit of her fighter. She was a young woman with short blonde hair and fierce gray eyes. She had been flying since she was 16 years old. She had never lost a dogfight in her life. "All fighters, this is Turner," she said into her comm. "Stay tight. Hit hard. Make them remember us." Her squadron launched from the Defiance and screamed toward the enemy. The Velrath fighters moved to meet them. There were at least 50 enemy craft for every human fighter. Amy did not hesitate. She flew directly into the heart of the enemy formation. Her weapons fired in rapid bursts. Velrath fighters exploded around her. She twisted and turned through the chaos, avoiding enemy fire by inches. The Velrath pilots were confused. No species flew like this. No logical being would take such risks. The humans seemed to have no fear of death. They attacked with a fury that made no sense to the alien mind. Amy destroyed her fifth fighter and immediately targeted a nearby cruiser. The ship was 100 times her size. Its shields could stop most weapons. But Amy found the weak point near the engine section. She fired everything she had. The cruiser exploded. On the bridge of his flagship, General Torvax watched the battle unfold. His officers reported losses with growing alarm. The humans were cutting through his outer defenses like a blade through flesh. "How is this possible?" one officer demanded. "They have 12 ships. We have 3,000, Torvax said nothing. He watched the human fighters dance through his formations. He watched the human warships take hit after hit and keep fighting. He watched his own pilots struggle to match the speed and aggression of the enemy. These humans did not fight like any species he had faced before. They did not calculate odds. They did not protect themselves. They threw themselves into danger as if their own lives meant nothing. "Increase fire on the lead ship," Torvax ordered. "Destroy their captain." The Defiance shook under heavy bombardment. Alarms screamed across the bridge. Damage reports came in from every section. "Shields at 40%, Kevin reported. "Hull breaches on decks, 7 and 12. Daniel gripped the arms of his chair. "Return fire. Target their weapons arrays. Keep pushing forward." The Defiance continued its attack. 2 other human ships moved to support it. They formed a spear point aimed directly at the Velrath line. Across the galaxy, observers from other species watched in disbelief. The Korath could not understand why the humans had not retreated. The Sindari analyzed the battle data and found no logical explanation for human tactics. The Oroth simply stared at their screens in silence. Ambassador Zyreth watched from the surface of Kethros 7. His heart pounded in his chest. The humans were actually fighting. They were actually pushing back the Velrath fleet. It seemed impossible. "Look at them," a council member whispered. "They fight like they have nothing to lose." "No," Zyreth said quietly. "They fight like they have everything to protect." In space, Amy Turner led her squadron against a second enemy cruiser. Half her pilots were gone. The others were low on fuel and ammunition. But none of them asked to fall back. "One more run," Amy said. "Make it count." They dove toward the cruiser. Enemy fire filled the space around them. Amy felt a shot graze her wing. Warning lights flashed across her console. She ignored them. Her weapons found their target. The cruiser's reactor went critical. The explosion lit up the battlefield. Amy pulled away as debris flew past her cockpit. She had destroyed 12 enemy cruisers in the first wave of battle. Her fighter was barely holding together. She did not care. "All fighters, regroup on the Defiance," she ordered. "We are not done yet." On the Velrath flagship, General Torvax received the latest casualty reports. He had lost over 200 ships in the first hour of battle. The humans had lost 3. His officers looked at him with uncertainty in their eyes. This was not supposed to happen. The Velrath Dominion did not lose battles to primitive species from the edge of the galaxy. Torvax stared at the tactical display. The human ships were still fighting, still advancing, still refusing to accept defeat. "What are these creatures?" one officer asked in a low voice. Torvax did not answer. But for the first time in 30 years of war, he felt something he had not felt since he was young. He felt doubt. The battle continued to rage in the darkness of space. Human ships burned and broke apart. Velrath cruisers exploded under precise fire. Fighters from both sides twisted through the chaos in deadly dance. And somewhere far away, the other species of the galaxy began to ask themselves a question they had never asked before. What if the humans could win? The thought was impossible. The thought was absurd. But as they watched the small human fleet tear into the mighty Velrath armada, they could not help but wonder. Perhaps they had underestimated humanity. Perhaps everyone had. The space battle raged above Kathros 7. But the real horror for the Velrath was about to begin on the surface below. Major Scott Morgan stood in the drop bay of the transport ship Thunderbolt. He was a broad man with a scarred face and steady hands. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth before joining the Space Marines. He knew what battle looked like. He knew what death smelled like. Around him stood 8,000 human soldiers. They checked their weapons and adjusted their armor. They said quiet prayers and thought of home. Many of them knew they would not survive this day. "Listen up," Scott said, his voice cutting through the noise. "The Velrath have over 500,000 troops on the ground. They have tanks, they have artillery, they have air support, and there are only 8,000 of us." The soldiers looked at him without fear. They had volunteered for this mission. They understood the odds. "We are not here to win by numbers," Scott continued. "We are here to show the galaxy what humans are made of. We are here to protect people who cannot protect themselves. We are here because it is the right thing to do." He raised his rifle above his head. "Now let us go down there and give those aliens something to remember." The transport ships descended through the atmosphere of Kathros 7. Anti-aircraft fire erupted around them. 2 ships took direct hits and spiraled toward the ground in flames. The others kept going. The first wave of Marines landed on the outskirts of the Marathi capital city. Velrath troops immediately moved to engage them. The enemy soldiers were massive creatures, with thick armor and powerful weapons. Each one stood over 8 feet tall. Sergeant Lisa Grant led her platoon out of the landing zone and into the ruined streets. She was a woman of 30 years, with brown skin and fierce dark eyes. She had grown up in a rough neighborhood on Earth. She was not afraid of anything. "Contact front," one of her soldiers shouted. "Enemy squad incoming." Lisa raised her rifle and fired. The Velrath soldiers advanced with heavy steps that shook the ground. They fired energy weapons that burned through walls and melted stone. "Hold the line," Lisa ordered. "Do not give them an inch." Her 40 soldiers faced over 200 enemy troops. They should have been overwhelmed in minutes. But the humans did not break. They fought from cover. They moved with precision. They covered each other and struck at every weakness. When one soldier fell, another took their place. When ammunition ran low, they used knives and fists. The Velrath could not understand it. These humans were smaller. They were weaker. They had inferior weapons and no armor that could stop Velrath fire. Yet they refused to retreat. They refused to surrender. They refused to die quietly. Lisa took a shot to her shoulder. The impact spun her around and dropped her to her knees. Blood ran down her arm. She gritted her teeth and forced herself back up. "Is that all you have?" she screamed at the enemy. "Come on, give me more." She kept firing. Her soldiers cheered and pushed forward. The Velrath line began to crack. Across the city, similar battles erupted in every district. Human Marines advanced through the streets like a flood. They were outnumbered 60 to 1, but they acted like they had already won. Major Scott Morgan led the main assault on the enemy command post. The building was a massive fortress, surrounded by walls and guard towers. Over 10,000 Velrath troops defended it. Scott had 300 Marines. "We are going straight through the front door," he told his officers. "Speed and violence. Do not stop for anything." The attack began at dawn. Human soldiers sprinted across open ground under heavy fire. Many fell in the first charge. The others kept running. Scott reached the outer wall and planted an explosive charge. The blast ripped a hole in the stone. Marines poured through the gap and engaged the enemy in close combat. The fighting was brutal. Humans and Velrath struggled hand to hand in narrow corridors. Weapons fired at point-blank range. Bodies fell on both sides, but the humans kept coming. Every time the Velrath pushed them back, they attacked again. Every time a squad was destroyed, another took its place. They were like a force of nature that could not be stopped. In the Marathi shelters beneath the city, Ambassador Zyrith watched the battle through remote cameras. He saw human soldiers fighting against impossible odds. He saw them fall and rise again. He saw them refuse to quit no matter how bad things got. They scream when they charge, a council member said in wonder. They make noise when they attack. Why? Zyrith shook his head. I do not know. But it seems to terrify the Velrath. It was true. The Velrath soldiers had never faced an enemy like this. They were used to species that calculated odds and retreated when logic demanded it. They were used to enemies that valued survival above all else. Humans did not think that way. Humans would die for their friends. They would sacrifice themselves for strangers. They would charge into certain death if they believed in the cause. The Velrath began to whisper a new word among themselves. A word they had not used in centuries of conquest. Fear. Private Nathan Wells crouched behind a broken wall and reloaded his rifle. He was only 22 years old. He came from a small town in the middle of America. He had joined the military because he wanted to see the stars. Now he was watching his friends die on an alien world. 3 members of his squad were already gone. The rest were wounded and low on ammunition. We cannot hold this position, one soldier said. We need to fall back. Nathan shook his head. If we fall back, they get through to the civilian shelters. We stay. He looked at the approaching enemy force. Over 100 Velrath soldiers advanced toward their position. Nathan had 12 rounds left in his rifle and a knife on his belt. For Earth, he said quietly. For the people we are protecting. He stood up and fired. The battle raged for hours. Human Marines fought with everything they had. They gave ground slowly, making the enemy pay for every inch. They turned every street into a death trap. They turned every building into a fortress. As the sun set on Kethros 7, something remarkable happened. The Velrath advance stopped. The enemy pulled back to defensive positions. For the first time in the history of the Dominion, a ground assault had been halted by a force less than a 20th of their size. Major Scott Morgan stood in the ruins of the command post and looked at what remained of his force. Over 3,000 Marines had fallen. The survivors were exhausted and wounded, but they were still standing. And the Velrath were afraid to attack again. Scott raised his rifle toward the darkening sky. We held, he said. We held them. Across the battlefield, human soldiers cheered. They had done the impossible. They had stopped the unstoppable army, and somewhere in the galaxy, other species began to believe that maybe the Velrath could be defeated after all. General Torvax stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the tactical display. His fleet had lost over 400 ships. His ground forces had been stopped by a handful of human soldiers. Nothing made sense anymore. Order a full assault, he commanded. Use everything we have. Destroy them all. His officers hurried to obey. The remaining Velrath ships began to form up for a massive attack. This time, they would hold nothing back. This time, they would crush the humans completely. Captain Daniel Cole watched the enemy movements from the bridge of the Defiance. His ship was badly damaged. Only 9 human vessels remained in the fight. They had fought beyond all expectations, but they could not survive another full assault. Enemy fleet is regrouping, Commander Kevin Price reported. They are preparing for a concentrated attack. Daniel nodded slowly. He had known this moment would come. He had hoped they could hold out longer. But he had no regrets. They had shown the galaxy what humanity stood for. All ships, prepare for final engagement, he said. It has been an honor serving with you. Then something unexpected happened. 3 massive fleets dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. The Korath Union, the Sindari Republic, the Orith Collective. Over 5,000 warships appeared in formation behind the human fleet. Kevin stared at his sensors in disbelief. "Sir, Allied fleets have arrived. They are hailing us." A message appeared on the main screen. It came from Admiral Thex of the Korath Union. He was a tall, insect-like being with compound eyes and mandibles that clicked when he spoke. "Human Captain," Thex said, "we watched your battle. We saw your courage. We saw you stand alone against the Dominion, while the rest of us hid in fear. We will not hide anymore. We stand with you." Similar messages came from the Sindari and the Orath. They had all been watching. They had all seen the humans refuse to give up. And that impossible bravery had inspired them to act. Daniel felt his heart swell with emotion. They had come. They had actually come. "Admiral Thex," he said, "we welcome your help. Let us finish this together." The combined fleet moved to engage the Velrath. The balance of power had shifted. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion faced an enemy that could match their strength. On the surface of Kethros 7, Major Scott Morgan received word of the Allied arrival. His surviving Marines cheered when they heard the news. But Scott knew the battle was not over yet. "The Velrath still have a shield generator protecting their main stronghold," he said. "As long as that shield stands, they can hold out forever. We need to take it down." He looked at the soldiers around him. They were exhausted. Many were wounded. But they all met his gaze with steady eyes. "I need volunteers for a strike team," Scott said. "This will be a one-way mission. The generator is deep inside enemy territory. Whoever goes in probably will not come back." Every soldier stepped forward. Scott felt pride burn in his chest. He selected a team of 50 Marines. Among them was Private Nathan Wells, the young soldier from the small town in America. Nathan checked his weapon and looked at his commanding officer. "What is the plan, sir?" Scott pointed at the distant enemy fortress. "We go in, fast and hard. Fight through everything in our way. Someone has to get close enough to plant the explosive charge on the generator. Once it goes off, the shield falls, and the Allied fleet can hit the stronghold from orbit." Nathan nodded. He understood what Scott was not saying. "I will carry the charge," Nathan said. Scott looked at the young man. "Are you sure? You know what that means." "I know." Nathan smiled slightly. "I came here to make a difference. This is my chance." The strike team moved out under cover of darkness. They advanced through enemy lines with speed and silence. Velrath patrols swept the area, but the humans slipped past them like shadows. They reached the outer perimeter of the fortress. Guard towers swept the ground with powerful searchlights. Enemy soldiers patrolled every entrance. "Move on my signal," Scott whispered. "Hit them hard, and do not stop." The attack began. 50 humans charged into the fortress against thousands of defenders. The fighting was savage and brutal. Marines fell one by one, but the others kept pushing forward. Nathan ran through the chaos with the explosive charge strapped to his back. Bullets and energy blasts flew past him. He saw friends die beside him. He did not stop. They fought through the outer defenses. They broke through the inner gate. They pushed deeper and deeper into the enemy stronghold. By the time they reached the shield generator, only 8 Marines remained. The massive machine hummed with power in the center of a heavily guarded chamber. Scott looked at his remaining soldiers. They were all wounded. They could not fight much longer. "Hold them off," he ordered. "Give Nathan time to plant the charge." The Marines took positions and opened fire on the incoming enemy troops. Nathan ran toward the generator. Velrath soldiers tried to stop him. He shot 2 of them and dodged past a third. He reached the generator and pulled the explosive charge from his back. His hands were steady as he armed the device and attached it to the main power core. "Charge is set," he called out. 60 seconds to detonation. "All units, fall back," Scott ordered. "Get out now." The surviving Marines began to retreat. But Nathan did not move. Enemy troops were closing in from every direction. If he left the charge unguarded, they might disarm it. "Nathan, move," Scott shouted. "That is an order." Nathan looked at his commander and shook his head. "If I move, they will stop the detonation. Someone has to stay." Scott felt his heart break. He wanted to argue. He wanted to drag the young man out by force. But he knew Nathan was right. "It has been an honor, Private Wells." Nathan smiled. "Tell them we did not give up. Tell them we fought until the end." The surviving Marines retreated through the fortress. Nathan stayed at the generator, fighting off every Velrath soldier who came near. He was shot 3 times. He kept fighting. The timer counted down. 10 seconds. 5 seconds. Nathan thought of his family back on Earth. He thought of his small town and the stars he had dreamed of seeing. He had seen them. He had walked among them. And now he would die defending people he had never met. It was enough. It was more than enough. The charge exploded. The shield generator was destroyed. The protective barrier around the Velrath stronghold vanished. In orbit, the combined fleet detected the shield failure. Commander Kevin Price relayed the information to all Allied ships. "The shield is down," he announced. "All units, target the enemy stronghold." Thousands of weapons fired at once. The Velrath fortress was hit by the combined firepower of 4 civilizations. It burned and collapsed under the assault. General Torvax watched his command center crumble around him. His army was broken. His fleet was surrounded. Everything he had built was falling apart, and it had all started because 12 human ships answered a distress call from strangers. The Velrath line collapsed. Enemy ships began to surrender or flee. On the ground, Velrath soldiers threw down their weapons and begged for mercy. The battle was over. The impossible had happened. Humanity had won. The sun rose over Kethros 7. The smoke of battle still drifted across the ruined capital city. The wreckage of Velrath ships burned in orbit above the planet. The war was over. General Torvax was brought before Captain Daniel Cole in chains. The once mighty commander of the Velrath Dominion stood with his head bowed. His yellow eyes showed no anger, only confusion. "Why did you come?" Torvax asked. "You had nothing to gain. The Marathi could not pay you. They could not offer you resources or territory. Why did you risk everything for strangers?" Daniel looked at the defeated general. He thought about the question for a long moment before answering. "Because they asked for help," he said simply, "and we were able to give it." Torvax shook his massive head. "I have conquered over 200 species. I have studied every civilization in the galaxy. None of them would do what you did. None of them would sacrifice their own people for beings they had never met." "Then you have never understood what makes a species great," Daniel replied. "It is not power. It is not conquest. It is the willingness to stand for others when standing alone." Torvax was taken away to face judgment. The Velrath Dominion would never threaten the galaxy again. Their empire had crumbled in a single battle against a species they had dismissed as primitive and unimportant. The human fleet gathered above Kethros 7 to honor their dead. 4 ships had been lost. Over 2,000 soldiers had fallen on the ground below. Each name was read aloud over the communication channels. Each sacrifice was remembered. Captain Daniel Cole stood on the bridge of the Defiance and listened to the names. He thought about the families who would receive news of their loved ones. He thought about the empty seats at dinner tables back on Earth. But he also thought about what those soldiers had achieved. They had shown the galaxy that hope was not foolish. They had proven that courage could overcome impossible odds. They had given the Marathi a future. Major Scott Morgan walked through the ruins of the capital city. His uniform was torn and stained with blood. Most of it was not his own. He had lost more than half his soldiers in the assault. He stopped at the place where Nathan Wells had made his final stand. The shield generator was a twisted wreck of metal. Nothing remained to mark where the young private had died. Scott knelt down and placed a small American flag on the ground. It was a tradition among human soldiers. A way to remember those who fell far from home. "You did it, kid," Scott said quietly. "You made a difference." He stood and saluted. Then he turned and walked away. Ambassador Zyrith emerged from the underground shelter with the rest of the Marathi Council. The pale blue aliens looked at the destruction around them. Their city was ruined. Their beautiful buildings were rubble. But they were alive. Zyrith found Captain Daniel Cole standing near the remains of the High Council chamber. The human looked tired. His eyes were heavy with grief and exhaustion. "Captain Cole," Zyrith said, "I do not have words to express what my people feel. You came when no one else would. You fought when fighting seemed pointless. You saved us." Daniel turned to face the ambassador. "We did what anyone should have done. We answered a call for help. But no one else answered," Zyrith said. "Only you. Only humans." "Why?" Daniel thought about his family on Earth. He thought about his crew and the soldiers who had fallen. He thought about Nathan Wells and all the young men and women who would never go home. "Because that is who we are," he said. "We do not leave people behind. We do not ignore suffering. When someone needs help, and we can give it, we give it. It does not matter if we know them. It does not matter if we benefit. We help because helping is the right thing to do." Zyrith felt tears form in his large eyes. He had met many species in his long career as a diplomat. He had never met one like humanity. "The galaxy will remember this," he said. "My people will remember this forever." 1 month later, the Galactic Council held a summit on the neutral station of Nexus Prime. Representatives from every major civilization attended. The topic of discussion was humanity and the Battle of Kethros 7. Admiral Laura Bennett represented Earth at the summit. She stood before the assembled delegates and answered their questions. Many of them wanted to know how the humans had achieved such a victory. They expected her to talk about tactics and weapons and strategy. Instead, she told them about Private Nathan Wells. She told them about Sergeant Lisa Grant, holding her line against 200 enemy troops. She told them about Lieutenant Amy Turner destroying 12 cruisers in a single battle. She told them about Captain Daniel Cole leading 12 ships against 3,000 because someone asked for help. "You want to know how we won?" Laura said. "We won because we believe that every life matters. We won because we refuse to accept that the strong should prey on the weak. We won because we would rather die fighting for what is right than live knowing we did nothing." The chamber was silent. The other species looked at the human admiral with new eyes. The Korath delegate spoke first. "We watched your people fight. We saw them refuse to surrender even when they were surrounded. We saw them advance when they should have retreated. We could not understand it at first. Now we do. You fight with your hearts, not just your weapons." The Sindari representative nodded. "We have calculated the odds of your victory. They were less than 1%. By all logical measures, you should have been destroyed. But you did not calculate odds, you simply fought." "Yes," Laura said, "that is what humans do." The summit ended with a new alliance. The Korath Union, the Sindari Republic, the Orath Collective, and the human civilization of Earth formed a coalition dedicated to protecting the weak and opposing tyranny. They called it the Guardian Alliance. And at the center of that alliance stood humanity. On Kethros 7, the Marathi began to rebuild their world. They constructed new buildings and planted new gardens. They taught their children about the terrible battle and the strangers who had saved them. In the center of the rebuilt capital city, they erected a monument. It was a statue made of white stone, standing 30 feet tall. It showed a human soldier reaching down to lift a fallen companion. The soldier's face was determined. The companion's eyes were filled with hope. Beneath the statue, they carved an inscription in both Marathi script and human English. They came when no one else would. They fought when all seemed lost. They gave their lives so others could live. Humanity, our guardians, our friends. Ambassador Zyrith stood before the monument on the day it was unveiled. Thousands of Marathi gathered to witness the ceremony. Among them stood Captain Daniel Cole, Major Scott Morgan, and the surviving soldiers who had fought for their freedom. Zyrith turned to address the crowd. "We sent a message into the darkness," he said. "We asked for help without hope that anyone would answer. But someone did. Humans came from across the galaxy to stand beside us, They bled for us. They died for us. They shattered an army that no one believed could be defeated. He looked at Daniel Cole and smiled. Today, we honor their sacrifice, but more than that, we celebrate the truth they taught us. No one stands alone in this galaxy. Not anymore, because wherever there are humans, there is hope. The crowd cheered. Fireworks lit up the sky. Music played through the streets. Daniel Cole watched the celebration with quiet pride. He thought about the soldiers who could not be there. He thought about Nathan Wells and the thousands who had given everything. They had announced humanity to the galaxy. Not with words or diplomacy, with blood and courage, and an unbreakable will to protect the innocent. The stars above Kethros 7 shone bright and clear. And somewhere among them, other species looked toward Earth with new respect. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same.